Hello and welcome to the Import Export Hub channel, everybody. Bogdan here, your host for the next couple of minutes. I hope that you are all doing great. And guys, without further ado, let's dive into today's topic, which covers the imports and the exports for Argentina, one of the wealthiest countries 100 years ago. With abundant natural resources, it has a diversified industrial base and quite focused on agricultural exports, as you will see together with me in the following minutes. And as usual, I've compiled here a couple of Excel sheets in order to see who are the biggest import and export drivers for Argentina, but also to see later on, when I break the top 5 drivers for each flow, who are the main trading partners. So without anything else to add here, let's start with the exports for Argentina with 2021, the reference here if you want. And we see that for 2021, the exports amounted to some $78 billion, the biggest value in this 2017-2021 timeframe, with cereals on top, followed by chapter 23, so residues and waste from the food industries, animal fodder and the like, basically. On the third spot, we have here animal or vegetable fats with some $8.6 billion. On the fourth spot, we have vehicles and parts, so chapter 87, followed then by the mineral fuels chapter with $4.2 billion worth of exports. And then the last 5 chapters in this top 10 list include oilseeds, meat, commodities not elsewhere specified, miscellaneous chemical products on the 9th spot here, while precious and semi-precious metals sits on the 10th spot with some $2 billion worth of exports. In terms of the biggest share in Argentina's exports, the top 3 chapters make up for roughly 45%, quite concentrated if you ask me, while the top 10 chapters, again combined, make up for almost 80%, which is relatively good, underlining here the diversified industrial base of Argentina that I was telling you about earlier. In terms of year-on-year changes, the overall exports were up almost 42% in relative terms, which in absolute ones translates into $22-23 billion, mostly because of the variability of the commodity prices. And personally, I won't be surprised to see that in 2022, these changes will be even bigger, at least in absolute ones, given the current situation with Ukraine, Russia, inflation, recession, and so on. But anyways, going back to the year-on-year changes here, we see big positive changes in relative terms with miscellaneous chemical products, mineral fuels, and animal or vegetable fats chapters having the biggest changes, all above the 80% mark, while the oils, meat, and precious or semi-precious chapters behave more docile, if you want, in the range of 3 to 13%. And now, guys, with the top 10 export chapters briefly being covered, I will move to the import flow. And here we see how chapters ranking higher in the harmonized system, which are also the most diversified and complex ones, are on top. So chapter 84, 85, and 87. Then we have mineral fuels, followed by organic chemicals on the 5th spot, while with $3.3 billion worth of imports. We have on the 6th spot pharmaceutical products, plastic and articles thereof comes next with $3 billion. On the 8th spot, we have oil seeds, fertilizers come on the 9th spot with almost $2.3 billion. And lastly, this top 10 list of imports ends with chapter 72, so iron and steel, with some $1.8 billion worth of imports for 2021. Now, relative to the year-on-year changes for the top 10 import chapters, we have positive changes with an overall positive change of roughly 49% in relative terms, which brings the total amount to some $63 billion, which is close to the values of, I don't know, 2017 and 2018, when it seems that Chapter 87 had a very, very good performance. Here, as you can see, I've added also the exports in order to see Argentina's trade balance, which for 2021 was positive, almost $14.7 billion more exports than imports overall, with only two chapters, Chapter 87 and 12, having a positive trade balance in this top 10 import list. Chapters with potentially high added value like 85, 84, and 30 are in the red big time, and this could mean that even though Argentina has a strong and diversified industrial base, it's not quite there yet when it comes to exporting complex products, so it sits at the bottom of the global value chains. At least this is how I see the numbers for 2021. And now, guys, with the overall imports and the exports also being covered, I will take the top 5 chapters from each flow in order to see who are the main trading partners for Argentina. And I will begin with the biggest export drivers. So chapter 10, which saw in 2021 one of the best years, so to speak, at least considering this 2017-2021 time frame. And we have here some $13.5 billion worth of exports, with Brazil, Vietnam, and South Korea as the biggest trading partners. But of course, there are other important ones like, I don't know, Peru, Chile, or Algeria, just to name a couple of them from this top 10 list. Now, relative to the year-on-year changes, guys, we have here some 50% more exports in relative terms, which translates into almost $5 billion in absolute ones. So big bucks for the commodity traders last year, it seems. All top trading partners are in green, so all of them imported more, with the biggest absolute positive change happening here with Brazil and China, who cumulatively imported with some $1.6 billion more than they did in 2020. As for the main driver, well, it seems that maize was the main one for both Vietnam and Egypt, as Argentina, if I'm not mistaken, is the second or third largest exporter of maize after the United States. Now moving to the second biggest export driver, so chapter 23. Here, up until 2020, the volatility was not that high, but then it took off, and in 2021 we have some 48% positive change in relative terms, which translates into $4 billion in absolute terms, which brings the total exported amount to some $12.5 billion, with Vietnam here, Indonesia, and Spain as the main destinations. But of course, we have other important breeders, if you want, with a lot of livestock, like, I don't know, Poland with pigs, for example, or Malaysia with chickens. Now, relative to the year-on-year changes, all the top 10 partners had positive numbers, with Indonesia and Spain having the biggest absolute changes, more than $1 billion if we combined both of them. As for the main driver for both Indonesia and Iran, we have subheading 230400, so oil cake and other solid residues resulting from the extraction of soybean oils, as here too Argentina has a big competitive advantage. Now moving to the third largest export driver for Argentina in 2021, so chapter 15. Here the figures are a little bit lower, if I don't know, $8.6 billion can be considered a low amount, and we see how these relatively calm waters up until 2020 were disturbed by the huge demand that came in 2021, when the exports grow with almost $4 billion. Here, India, Iran, and Bangladesh were Argentina's main destination for 2021. But of course, we have other important partners in this top 10 list like Chile, China, or Mozambique. Again, just to name a couple of them. As we can see here, we have positive changes with all the top 10 trading partners, but the biggest absolute change happened with India and Iran, who cumulatively imported with $2 billion more in 2021 than they did in 2020. Bangladesh and South Korea also contributed to the big overall change, but for these particular countries, the change amounted to just $500 million more. As for the main drivers, well, for both China and Spain, we have a subchapter 150710, so crude soybean oil, whether or not degummed. And hopefully I've pronounced correctly this last word. Anyways, moving to the fourth biggest export driver, so chapter 87, vehicles and parts. And for 2021, we have a figure close to the average one for the 2017-2019 timeframe. And I'm excluding here 2020 as basically the entire world was in full pandemic mode. So it's safe to say that it bounced back to the pre-pandemic levels, with Brazil here, Chile, and Peru as the main destinations. But we have other important ones like, I don't know, Australia, Mexico, or South Africa. Again, just to name a couple. But generally speaking, the exports from this chapter are pretty much concentrated in the Central and South American market. As you can see here, all the top 10 trading partners had positive changes, with Brazil having the biggest absolute increase of roughly $1.7 billion if we compare with the 2020 figures, because if we compare with the 2019 ones, we have more or less the same values. Now, relative to Argentina's main exports from this chapter, we have light trucks towards Chile, while those towards South Africa are coming from subheading 870829. And guys, moving to the fifth export driver, here we have mineral fuels and oils, so chapter 27, with some $4.2 billion worth of exports. And we have Brazil again, the United States, and the United Arab Emirates as the main destinations. And here it's strange to see how the United Arab Emirates is behaving as an import country for crude petroleum. And I really don't know why is this happening. Maybe there are some triangulations, or who knows. Anyways, other important partners into this top 10 list include Chile, the Netherlands, or the BES Islands, so Bonaire, Saint Eustatius, and Saba, who, by the way, are overseas territories of the Netherlands. But we have also Bolivia or the Dominican Republic with some $32.4 million. Relative to the year-on-year changes, we have some 92% positive change, which in absolute terms translates into about $2 billion, with Brazil and the United States having the biggest year-on-year changes of roughly $650 million each. As for Argentina's main export drivers from this chapter, for Brazil we have liquefied propane, while towards the United Arab Emirates we have crude petroleum, so subheading 270900. And guys, finally, with this being covered, I will now move to the import flow, and I will start with the biggest driver, which was chapter 84, so machinery and mechanical appliances. And we see here roughly $9.5 billion worth of imports for 2021, with China, Brazil, and the United States as the main partners, followed by other strong industrial exporters like, I don't know, Germany, Italy, or Mexico. And we see here that all the top 10 partners had positive changes, with China having the biggest increase of almost $1.4 billion if we consider the absolute values. As for the main drivers, Lenovo and the company continues to grow its presence in the South American market, and in this case Argentina, as we have subheading 847130 driving most of the exports towards Argentina, while from Germany subheading 840820. So diesel engines are the main import driver for 2021, most probably for the Mercedes-Benz plant in Argentina. Anyways, moving to Argentina's second most important import driver, so chapter 85, and we see again China dominating the exports towards Argentina with some $3.3 billion, up 43% relative to 2020. Vietnam comes second, while Brazil sits on the third spot with some $524 million. But of course, there are other important trading partners like, I don't know, Thailand, Germany, or Malaysia. Again, just to name a couple of them from this top 10 list. In terms of year-on-year changes, except Germany here, who had almost 20% contraction, with the rest of the top 10 partners, the values were positive, with China and Vietnam having the biggest absolute change. And if I'm allowed to make a prediction here, I think that Vietnam's role in this relation with Argentina is going to grow even more to the detriment of China. Anyhow, regarding the main drivers from the United States, the main one was subchapter 851762, so excluding here the cellular phones, while from Thailand, the main import driver was subchapter 851220, so electrical lighting or visual signaling equipment for motor vehicles. So basically car parts. Moving on to Argentina's third largest import drivers, so chapter 87, we see that the supplying countries, at least the top 10 ones, are more spread out as opposed to the regional nature of the exports for the same chapter. And we have almost $6.5 billion worth of imports, with Brazil, China, and Thailand as the main trading partners. But we have other important ones like Japan, the United States, India, or Spain. Again, just to name a couple of them from this top 10 list. And relative to the year-on-year changes, we have here almost 40% positive change, with Brazil and China having the biggest absolute change, both above the $30 million mark. And finally, in terms of the main import drivers, from Japan we have gearboxes for vehicles, and most probably we're talking here of the gearboxes needed for the Nissan plant and Toyota plant, while from France we have parts and accessories for cars, which I'm almost 100% sure that they are for the Renault plant in Cordoba, Argentina, of course. Moving to the fourth biggest import driver, guys, so chapter 27, a very volatile one in terms of value, and we have here the United States as the main trading partner, followed by Bolivia, and on the third spot we have Qatar with almost $441 million worth of exports towards Argentina. And relative to the year-on-year changes, except here Bolivia, who had an insignificant 0.6% contraction, with the rest of the top 10 ones we have positive changes. The biggest absolute one happening in relation with the United States, who exported with almost $900 million more in 2021 than they did in 2020. As for the main drivers, from Qatar we have subchapter 271111, so liquefied natural gas, while from the United Arab Emirates we have subchapter 271019. So basically we're talking here about medium oils and preparations not containing biodiesel. And finally, guys, with this chapter being also covered, I'll move to the last one. Bear with me for 2 more minutes. And we have here chapter 29. So, organic chemicals with some $3.3 billion worth of imports in 2021, with China, the United States, and India as the main trading partners. But there are other important ones like, I don't know, Germany, Italy, or Spain. Again, just to name a couple from this top 10 list. China is once again dominating the exports towards Argentina from this chapter with almost $1.5 billion. And it's also the biggest gainer, if you want, in terms of year-on-year changes, if we consider the absolute values. India, it's also coming strong from behind. I think that there is still room to grow for India, if you ask me, while Brazil's or Mexico's exports towards Argentina are somewhat volatile. And relative to the main drivers here, hold on to your seats, guys, as I'm practicing my pronunciation. And from Switzerland, we have the uber specialized chemicals like heterocyclic compounds. While from Mexico, we have subchapter 291736, so terephthalic acids and salts, hopefully I pronounced it correctly, which are used primarily for the production of clothes and bottles. So, guys, with this last chapter being covered, these were the main imports and exports for Argentina in 2021. Thank you all for watching. I hope that some of you will appreciate it. Don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe buttons. And as usual, until next time, keep your busy safe. Thanks.